Okay, so today's episode is literally just things Scott has seen on the internet about the Detroit Tigers in the last 7 days. That's what today's show is. I'm just addressing a ton of stuff. Let's talk about Bally. Let's talk about third base. Let's talk about Torkelson. Let's talk about prospects. A bunch to go over all today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Friday, February 3rd, 2023. Thank you for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. All righty. We are back. So as I said in the cold open, today's episode is literally just going to be talking about stuff I've seen online about the Tigers. They haven't done anything in the last couple of days to really garner an entire segment, nonetheless, an entire show of conversation. But there's a lot of stuff that has happened in the last 6 or 7 days. They're small things that we haven't talked about because they're small things. So really just 7 or 8 really small things I've seen, discourses, discussions, articles, whatever about the Tigers. Okay. So first off, I think that this one is kind of the most pressing as it stands right now for a good reason, not a bad reason. But it's the most recent thing to happen at the time of this recording. The Bally Sports crew has expanded as they are bringing in Cameron Maybin and Todd Jones, the roller coaster baby. They also earlier in the offseason got rid of Jack Morris. I really don't have anything to say about Jack Morris. They let Jack Morris go. I'm not whatever. I don't really have anything to add about that. But I do think that Cameron Maybin and Todd Jones are fantastic additions to this broadcasting crew. Cameron Maybin, if you've watched a Yankee game in the last year, has been doing a fantastic job on Yes Network. He comes in. Todd Jones is also just who doesn't love Todd Jones? Todd Jones is the man, fan favorite from a great era, and I can't wait to see what he does either. It sounds like as far as their roles, Shep is still play-by-play, and Petrie is still going to have a pretty prominent role as a color commentator, but it also sounds like Simo is getting a huge step up in role. So it sounds like he's going to be one of the go-to analysts this season as well, whether it's color commentary or whether I don't know if they're going to do a 3-person booth. I don't know the plan, but it sounds like Petrie and Simo are both going to be pretty prominent in the color commentary area of the broadcast crew. And then we already talked about Shep. And it sounds like Maybin and Jones are going to be kind of and by the time you hear this recording, more info might have already come out. You may already know by the time you're listening to this kind of what their roles are. But it sounds like they're going to be doing a lot of pre and post game stuff, which is fine. Again, they crushed it. Maybe they'll go mid game to some of them. I kind of drew the similarity to what Jimmy Howard does for Bally for the Red Wings. He's not in the booth or anything, but he is he's a newer addition. He's doing some pre and post game work, doing some intermission work, stuff like that. So I think that this is a great addition is basically just what I want to say. Not too much of anything else. Just fantastic, A+, good move, Bally. I know that Bally's had some rumors about bankruptcy and whatnot, so who knows what's going to happen with that. I'm not a expert on the company of Bally Sports, the network itself. However, I do know that this is a great trade-off and just great additions in general. So we'll gladly take it. The other thing I wanted to discuss was the Tigers' schedule the first couple of months of the season, okay? It's rough. I'm not going to lie to you. And I know that there's a lot of frustration because the Tigers have gotten off to really slow starts in the last 2 years. And seeing a really tough schedule in April and early May, that the cutoff is right after May 15th. because they end May with Pittsburgh, Washington, Kansas City, Chicago White Sox, and Rangers. That, like, none of those, there's a chance that all of those teams are under 500 next year. A chance. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but a chance. The first month and a half, however, is absolutely brutal. Let's just read it off, okay? In order, you start with Tampa, then it's Houston, Boston, Toronto, San Francisco, Cleveland, Baltimore, Milwaukee, Baltimore again, the Mets, St. Louis, Cleveland, Seattle. That is your opening day through May 15th. That is your schedule. That's rough. And so I just wanted to get out ahead of it. Really, it is the only reason I'm bringing it up. Like, I tweeted that out January 25th, so a little over a week ago, when it started getting some people talking about the early schedule and whatnot. I just wanted to get ahead of it because I know that there's going to be, oh my goodness, we can't play in April. That's 3 years in a row we've gotten off to a slow start. This is the worst. If we do get off to a slow start, yeah, it will be the worst, and that will suck, and it will be the third year in a row. But at least this year, it's, hey, look, they had a brutal schedule. And I guess my point is just, let's play it by year, you know? Let's just see how the team looks. If they're losing every game by 8 and the offense is dreadful again, that's one thing, right? That's okay. Yeah, like, this is clearly same story, third year in a row. But if they look decent and are losing close ball games and are a little more competitive than we expect, and the offense isn't dreadful, that's really the biggest thing. Because the pitching was never really the problem last year as a whole. If the offense doesn't look dreadful and they hang around in some of these games and maybe even steal a series or two, I don't need them to have, an 800 winning percentage through the midway point in May to be like, haha, like, proved everybody wrong. Look, they got off to a good start and everyone thought they were going to get off to a bad start. I just need not, like, what is the record we've hit 2 years in a row? Like 9-21 or 9-28 or whatever it is. Like, I just need not that. I just need some semblance of, like, competitive baseball being played in the first month and a half. Okay. So I just wanted to jump out ahead of that one, really, is all I wanted to do. Next up, let's talk about Hitting Harold for just like a hot sec. Hitting Harold hits a just beautiful walk-off home run. And to, like, a big game. Like, I think it was to win the league, if I'm not mistaken. But he's actually had a few. He's like several walk-off home runs and, like, big moment home runs as well in the last month down south. So, like, good for him. Good for him. Shouldn't change anyone's opinion of Harold. Much different league, much different competition. But very, very cool and very happy for him. For those who don't know, Harold is on a minor league contract with an invite to spring training via the Colorado Rockies. I think he might be able to do some damage there. Obviously, there's the, oh, look, the air is thinner, like, whatever. But what people don't talk about in Coors, and one of the more underrated factors as to why it's a hitter's park, is not just the thin air. It's the gaps are giant. That outfield is wide. That is a huge outfield. Huge. And so, yes, like, the ball travels further and you can hit more homers out there and it's Coors and ha. But that is a doubles factory if you don't have home run power. And I think that, I don't know if Harold's going to make the team out of camp. I don't know what the Rockies spring training roster looks like or whatnot. But I would reckon that he's going to get some playing time at the major league level this year. And he could really flourish there just by dumping the ball over the second baseman's head repeatedly and just finding himself on second base. I'm happy for Harold. I still think it's very much the right decision to let him go, but I will always root for Harold. He gave us a lot of cool moments over the last couple of years. Okay, let's keep going down the list. Again, this is just like things I've seen on the internet about the Tigers in the last 7 days. So let's keep going down the list. But first, I got to tell you all about our friends over at FanDuel. We're all really pumped about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sports book in America. It's FanDuel, and if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features to make betting on sports easy and fun. You can download FanDuel now so you can get the Super Bowl 57 no sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back, $3,000 in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line, the point spread, who will score a touchdown. Look, the Super Bowl is the most bet on sporting event of the year. They're going to have some really cool props, odds, just the best in the business. So download the FanDuel Sportsbook app today. It's secure, it's safe, it's super easy to use. And the best part is you get your money instantly. If you win, you get your money. No waiting till the next day, no anything like that. Instant winnings in your account. It's awesome. So join FanDuel today at the FanDuel.com/lockedon website to claim your no sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Segment 2 here, Locked On Tigers. I just hit my lip like really hard when I was taking a drink of water there in the break. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. For your next listen, check on the Locked On MLB Prospects podcast. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. Okay, let's talk Turkey. Let's just keep going down this list. What else do I got? Spencer Torkelson. Been seeing a lot of Torkelson discourse online over the last really off season, but especially it's picked up a little bit more in the last week or so. There's been some articles written about him and whatnot. So here's where I stand on Torque, and we will do a full breakdown of Spencer Torkelson, what he struggled with last year, what we can expect out of him this season before the season starts. Okay, you will get that episode. It's going to happen. We're going to do that and try and do that with every single person on the roster. All right. But what I'll say right now is I think that there are some people that are running before we're walking. And I still very much believe in Torkelson. And I know that some people don't already. And some people are already out on him and he sucks and whatever. And that's fine. I still believe in the talent. My thing is, I think, like I said, I think we're running before we're walking in some regard. Batted ball data does not matter if you're not consistently putting the ball in play. And he did not do enough with balls in the strike zone to garner or for me to consider it being consistently putting the ball in play. And it's not, he doesn't have crazy high strikeout numbers. He doesn't have crazy high swing and miss numbers. But he was very passive, took a lot of pitches, was even too passive. We talked about it at nauseum last year, right? So his batted ball data is not bad, and that's great. That's awesome. I'm glad that he is hitting the ball hard, relatively, especially in his second stint when he was up in the majors. I'm very happy about that. That's a good sign. And I still believe that this organization and him will develop a good product and he will be a solid big leaguer. But we need to just have him square up pitches down the middle before we go anywhere else. The way too many swings and misses on balls right down the middle and way too many either pop outs to right field or ground balls to third base on balls that were literally right down the middle. He needs to, his run value on four-seam fastballs was -8 last year. That's brutal. His run value on, when you take a look at where pitches are, like just where they are location-wise, not the type of pitch, whatever, just in general, where the pitch is located, the heart of the plate pitches run value for Torkelson last year was -11. And the shadow pitches, the could be strikes, could be balls, kind of fringe pitches, was -27. And again, it's not that he was swinging and missing at all of those. He was taking a lot of them, especially the shadow pitches. And then the balls that were comfortably balls, he was a massive plus in run value wise. And the chase pitches that were like so far out of the plate they weren't even considered, he was also massive pluses in. So The walk numbers are fine. The whiff numbers are fine. The strikeout numbers are fine. The batted ball data is fine. You can look at all of that and be like, look, this is not that bad. And you'd be right. But let's just consistently hit pitches right down the middle. If you were to break the strike zone into 9 sections, let's just focus on consistently. And this isn't even just a Torkelson thing. Remember when we faced Joe Ryan last year twice? And both times he basically just threw 110 four-seam fastballs down the middle and dominated us both outings. This is the entire roster. This is something that everyone sucked at last year, but we're just talking about Torkelson because that's the arguments and debates I've seen online about him. Let's just focus on consistently squaring up fastballs down the middle of the plate before we get into what can he do with pitches in the shadow areas, what can he do with like breaking balls, how hard is he hitting pitches in certain areas, is he consistently hitting the ball hard, all pitches combined, right? I want to crawl before we walk, before we run. I'm hoping at some point in the season we can have those conversations about what he can do offensively and what he can continue to improve on. But for right now, I just want to see consistently hitting pitches literally right down the middle. And again, I think he will do it. I think he'll make adjustments. But just a lot of arguments about like Torkelson's batted ball data and how, and all that stuff. And I think we just need to realize that, yes, it's important, but it's only like there are some players that have really solid batted ball data, but don't put the ball in play. And I'm not saying Torkelson's to like that extreme. I'm not saying he's like Joe Adell or anything like that, but let's crawl before we walk. That's all I'm saying. I've used that analogy 19 times. I'm sorry. Okay, that's all I have to say about Torkelson. Like I said, we'll do a deep dive on him later in the offseason, but I've just been seeing a lot of debates about him from a lot of different people, and I just want to throw my 2 cents out there. Next up, we have Keith Law in his ranking of the Tigers farm system being dead last. I don't have too much to say on this. Keith Law's obviously been doing this a very long time and is pretty well respected. And you can go check the list out himself. Go check the list out yourself and whatnot. But just like the Tigers aren't the worst farm system in baseball, in my opinion. Like they just aren't. So I don't really have too much else to add on to that. This farm system took a massive step forward developmentally last year. Maybe the biggest step forward as far as the player development goes in my entire lifetime. And so I don't agree with this whatsoever. And again, that's like not a slight on the author or anything. Like he's been doing this for a long time, and a lot of people really respect his work very greatly. But I can't see any way in which the Tigers have the worst farm system in baseball. And it added to the fire. And like Thursday, everybody was like, "Oh, look, we're terrible." And like, this is not the worst farm system in baseball. And there's a lot of kids that are going to be up in the next 12 to 24 months that you should be rightfully very excited about. So I would not agree with that, I guess is my point. That's all. Don't really have too much else to say. Just we're not 30th. Okay, I have 3 more things I want to talk about. Let's do them after the break. We'll get into the last 3 right after this. All right. Welcome back. 3rd and final segment here, Locked On Tigers. So just talking about things I've seen on the internet about the Tigers in the last week. Jeimer Candelario was one that kind of resurfaced a little bit. And there was some articles written, and it was talked about a little bit. Is the decision to not keep Jeimer something that the organization should still stand by, or that you still agree with? I 100% still would have let Jeimer Candelario walk. I do not understand the late pushback very much at all in this one. Now, look, that's not to say, let's make this crystal clear. Jeimer Candelario might put up a better season than anybody that plays third base for the Detroit Tigers this year. I will 100% admit that right now on February 3rd, 2023. we'll get that out of the way. Okay. It might happen. And it's not like that far-fetched even. Right. But I personally don't view Jeimer Candelario as a long-term option at third base for a super competitive baseball team. He's going to be playing third for the Washington Nationals this year. Like, he got non-tendered. It wasn't even like he was a free agent that didn't get brought back. Like, at the end of the day, he's had 2 good seasons in 6 years, 5 years. One of them was a 60-game season, and the other isn't the most recent season. So he's had 2 good years. One of them was a 60-gamer, and the other one is 2 years removed. Like, his most recent year was brutal, one of the worst years of his career. So while I fully understand Jeimer's profile, and I completely agree with the fact that he might put up a better season than the Tigers' third base options in 2023, I still 100% agree with the decision to let him walk, because looking long term, I think that we are in a position now where we are setting ourselves up to try and find the next long-term third base option that is younger, has more team control, isn't about to be a free agent, and most importantly, just flat out has a higher ceiling than Jeimer Candelario. And I love Jeimer. The 2021 season he had was great, right? Doubles machine, all fantastic. But I think that we are taking steps to find a more solidified, higher ceiling, consistent, solid option at third base for the future. And I think you can be mad all you want that they didn't bring in a third base free agent, but there's going to be a lot of youth that's going to get a legitimate look at third base, and we're going to have hopefully a much clearer picture about who the future third baseman for this baseball team is at the end of 2023. And bringing Jeimer Candelario back, I don't think would have helped that situation, because I don't think that the answer is Jeimer Candelario, or really has been Jeimer Candelario, in somewhere between 12 and 16 months. Makes sense? Cool. Next up, we have Talkin' Baseball put out a tweet that said Javi Baez had a 2.5 baseball reference WAR, B-WAR, for the Tigers last season. And that was, in the entire history of the Detroit Tigers, that was the lowest team-leading B-WAR that we have ever had. That makes sense to me on all accounts, because even if you think of the horrible teams in Tigers history, like 2003, people forget Dmitry Young raked in 2003. That team lost 119 games, because that is legitimately, and I'm not exaggerating, the worst pitching staff I think I've ever seen in my life. And it might be unmatchable at how bad of a pitching staff it was. That is one of the worst pitching units in the history of this beautiful game, and certainly is probably the worst in the history of the Detroit Tigers. But and the offense wasn't good. Like, they almost lost 120 games. I'm not trying to make it sound like the offense was great and it's all the pitching's fault. Like, no, the offense was brutal too. But Dmitry Young was like a deserved all-star. Like, he put up monster numbers. Had an OPS in the 900s for a large majority of the season. So when you're thinking of the really bad teams like 2019, like, I mean, Nick Castellanos had a good start to that season. Obviously didn't finish the year. Shane Green had a really good start, didn't finish the year, but that was like the good Matthew Boyd season as well. Like, when you're thinking of the bad teams, there's at least usually one player that you're like, oh, they had a pretty good year. And last year, that just didn't really happen. The only players that you thought of that for last year's Tigers team were either players that got hurt and didn't get to play enough by the end of the season to have a high enough WAR total, or they were relievers. And relievers and WAR just like isn't a recipe for a high number. Relievers don't put up 3-4 WAR seasons. So Yeah, it makes sense. And it's something that we talked about a lot last season. What was the thing that I constantly complained about? I got a bad review one time because someone said that I was just complaining too much about this exactly. And it was the fact that I was just begging for a 2-win player. And apparently I complained about it too much, but that's fine. I stand by it. Just begging for a 2-win player. You know how many other teams are just, I don't want to say anybody's filled unless you're like the Dodgers with 2-win players, but 2 wins is not something you like write home about and you're like, oh my goodness, this is going to be really impressive. Like a 2-win season. We're pushing all our chips in on this kid. Like he's the future of the franchise. Like that's just a solid above replacement level everyday ball player. And our leader in B WAR last year, I like Fangraphs WAR better, but like the point remains, the leader in B WAR was a 2.5-win player with just a whole lot of replacement level talent last year. And hopefully that changes this year. And that's kind of the last thing we'll end on this. The last thing I have written down here is the amount of people I have seen online this entire offseason. And it's been, for whatever reason, kind of highlighted and is being talked about a lot more lately. Maybe it's because baseball season's right around the corner, but all of the like doomsday, like the Tigers are going to lose 120 games, people. What are we talking about? Like, look, I understand you're frustrated with the offseason, and we were bad last year and did not bring in any free agents. I understand it. I cover the team every day. I know. I know that all happened. You have every right. If you want to be frustrated about that, go ahead. Everything that could have possibly gone wrong last year went wrong. Everything. Everything. And they didn't even lose 100 games. So I don't know where people are getting the idea that this is going to be some like catastrophic worst roster in the history of baseball. We're going to lose 120 games nonsense, but like that's what it is. It's nonsense. I think let me put it this way. The Tigers last year went 66 and 96, right? 66 and 96 record. That is right in the middle-ish, almost exactly in the middle, between having a win total in the 50s and having a win total in the 70s. Last year, when everything went wrong, they were closer to a win total in the 70s than they were a win total in the 50s. And the best win total you can have in the 50s is 59 and 103. I think this year the Tigers are, I'm not saying they're going to, but I think they are much closer to a win total in the 70s than in the 50s. I think they're closer to 90 losses than 100 losses. And again, I'm not saying before I hear it, I'm not saying they're going to win, that they're going to go 72 and 90. I'm not saying they're going to win 75 games. But I just, it's remarkable to me that with how catastrophic of a failure last season was, we didn't even lose 100 games. And yet the mindset this year is that it's somehow going to get even worse than last year. They might lose 100. They might. They might lose 100. But they're going to lose 107, 112, 115. This might be the worst Tigers team ever nonsense has to stop. Some players won't be as bad as they were last year. They just won't because they can't. Jonathan Scope is going to be better than he was last year. And if he's not, guess what? The roster this year has safety valves all across the diamond. If Jonathan Scope doesn't do well, guess what? There's a plan B, Cesar Hernandez. If he doesn't do well, guess what? There's 5 prospects that are in a revolving door at third that I'm sure they would love to try out at second. Like there's like third, fourth, even fifth options for a lot of positions on this team. They're not going to be caught in the Alavila, oh, if the top option doesn't work out, we're hosed. And again, I'm not trying to make it sound like this team is going to be like over 500 or even like, again, even have like 72 or 73 wins. I would expect them to have a high 60s, low 70s win total. That's where I'm at. I don't understand the logic behind the doomsday. This is going to be like the worst Tigers team we've ever seen. And maybe I'm just reading too much into it and it's just people on the internet that are trying to be dramatic. I can appreciate that. You guys call me overly dramatic all the time. That's fine. But I just this like we're not buckling up for the 03 Tigers here. We're not buckling up for the 2019 Tigers here. There's some talent on this team that either didn't play or had their career worst outlier season last year and either will play or bounce back this year. There you go. That's all I got. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. For your next listen, check on the Locked On MLB Prospects podcast. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia. He's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It is free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Okay, I think that's all I got. I appreciate y'all. This was kind of a fun episode, just talking about a lot of different stuff, just bouncing ideas off each other. We will be back on Monday for our last week of 3 episodes a week. And then after that, we go back to 5. Pitchers and catchers start reporting. World Baseball Classic a little bit after that as well. It's almost back, baby. Baseball's almost back. I'll see y'all on Monday. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch y'all then, baby. Go Tigers.